This is a Sikha from Lakuta Sikhas, Chelek Yates, Parshas Re'eh, Sikha Aleph. And the topic of the Sikha is that in this week's Parsha, we learned the Pasuk at the very beginning where it says, Re'eh anechi nesen lifnechem hayom bracha uklala. And we learned the translations of Targum Onkelos and Targum Yonasan on the word klala. And there are four parts in the Sikha. The Rebbe will, number one, ask three questions on the Targumim. Number two, answer the questions. Number three, present a deeper understanding of the answer. And number four, connect it to the Haftarah of this week. In the very first pasuk of our parsha, where it says Re'ei anechi nesen lifnechem hayom bracha uklala, so there are two targumim. The Targum Onkelos understands the words bracha uklala to mean birchen ulevatin, which means brachas and klalas, blessings and curses. And that's also how he understands the word klala in the later psukim, because in the first four psukim of the parsha, the word klala is mentioned three times. First, it says in our pasuk, "Re'eh nechi nesen lefnechem hayom bracha uklala," and then the next pasuk says, "As a bracha, you get the bracha for listening to Hashem." Then the third pasuk says, "V'haklala," you get the klala for not listening to Hashem. And then the fourth pasuk says that when Hashem brings you to Eretz Yisrael, you should place the bracha on Har Grizim and the klala on Har Evel. So in all three places, the Targum Onkelos translates the word klala to mean curses. However, the Targum Yonasan and also the Targum Yerushalmi, they translate the word uklala in both psukim, the first two times that it appears, not the third time, the first two times. Both where it says in our pasuk, bracha uklala, and also two psukim later where it says va'klala im loisishmu, they translate the word klala to mean v'chilufa, which means the substitute or the exchange. So it says bracha and the substitute or the exchange of bracha. So they translate klala in those two places to be chilufa. And there are three questions here. The first question is, what's the reason for the difference between the two targumim about the translation of the word klala? Why do they each translate it differently? The second question is that it's even more difficult in that the Targum Yonasan in the later pasuk, the third time where it says klala, where it says that you should place the klala al har evel, so he changes and translates the word haklala as umalatataya, which means a curse. So besides for the first question about the difference between Targum Onkelos and Targum Yonasan, that one translates klala to be ulavatin, a curse, and the other one translates klala to be vichilufa, an exchange or a substitute, when we look at Targum Yonasan himself, it's even more difficult to understand that he himself changes between how to translate the word klala. The first two times he uses the translation of chilufa, and the third time he uses the translation of umalatataya, that it's a curse. Another difficulty in the Targum Yonasan, besides for switching between the first two times and the third time in the translation of the word klala, another difficulty in the Targum Yonasan is that, number one, klala is a thing for itself. There's a bracha, there's a klala. They're two separate entities, and each one is an entity for itself. Whereas the word chilufa means the exchange from something else to this, meaning it doesn't give it its own identity. It's just saying it's an exchange from something else. It's not really giving the definition of this thing itself. Whereas the word klala actually gives it its own name, that it's its own entity. It's a klala. And number two, chilufa makes sense by two things that are different from one another, and that's why you're exchanging one for the other. That's why there is an exchange. But at the same time, they have to be connected, and therefore they are exchanged. In order to exchange one thing for the next, they have to be two separate entities, but they have to have some type of connection that therefore you could exchange one for the other. However, that can't apply by two things that are opposites, like over here, a bracha and a klala. And the Rabbi brings an example of this, of how we switch the word echad in Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem echad, to the word vaid in Baruch Shem Kvein Machusei Da'ilim Vaid. And the switch is done because there is a connection between each of the letters. The Rebbe explains the connection between the Aleph and a Vav, so the Aleph of Echad turns into the Vav of Vaed, and there's a connection between the Ches of Echad and the Ayin of Vaed, so it switches from a Ches to an Ayin, and there's a connection between the big Dalid in Echad and the regular Dalid in Vaed, and so it's exchanged for the Dalid in Vaed. But each of the exchanges, although they're different letters, but they have some sort of connection that therefore they could be exchanged. But bracha and klala are total opposites, and it wouldn't seem to make sense that one could be exchanged for the other. The explanation of this, and to answer all three questions, so the general difference between Targum Onkelos and Targum Yonason is that Targum Onkelos translates the words according to Pshuta Shel Mikra. He translates the words according to their simple meaning. And in some places, he'll translate it according to the Inyan, meaning he's going to consider the Inyan and not just a simple translation of the words. But even then, he's going to go according to the Pshuta of the Inyan, the simple meaning of the Inyan. Whereas Targum Yonason and Targum Yerushalmi, so in many places, they don't translate according to Pshuta. They don't follow the simple explanation, not the simple translation, and not the simple meaning of the Inyan, but rather it adds explanations and presents Midrash Chazal, Dinim, v'chulu. And so therefore, Targum Onkelos translates the word uklala as ulavatin, because that's what a klala is. It's a curse. However, according to Midrash Chazal, so this isn't glat. Because since the pasuk says Anoichi Neisen Lefnei Chamayim, it says over here in the pasuk Re'ei Anoichi Neisen Lefnei Chamayim. It's telling us, look, see what Hashem places before you today. Meaning, in other words, it's coming from Hashem. So the question is, how can we translate that Hashem is Neisen? And we know that it says Kol Neisen Ba'ayin Yafa Neisen. One who gives in a generous way. So surely Hashem is giving in a generous way. So how can we translate that Hashem is Neisen? He gives something which is the opposite of Taivu Vracha. It's understood that Ein Ra Yerid Milmailo and Mipi Elyon Leiteitze Haroyis. So how do we understand this? And therefore Targum Yonason explains that here Klala means Chilufa. It's the exchange from a bracha. What does he mean to say with this? Meaning, the reason there's a Klala isn't because of the Anoichi Neisen. Anoichi is not Neisen a Klala. So why is it a Klala? It says Klala. He says the meaning of Klala is Chilufa. What he's telling us is that it's not because of the Anoichi Neisen, but rather because of the Makabel. Meaning that through the Makabel not behaving properly, so the bracha is exchanged with a Klala. So that's what it's telling us. This is the exchange of a bracha. This Klala, it's a Klala, but it's the exchange of a bracha, meaning it was supposed to be a bracha. What came from Hashem is a bracha. So why was there this exchange? Because of the behavior of the Makabel. And this is similar to what it says right afterwards in the next pasuk, to the idea that the behavior of the Makabel of Tishmu Mitzvah Hashem Alekechem brings the Anoichi Neisen bracha. So too, the reason it's a klala, it's not because of the Anoichi Neisen, it's because of the Makabel, and therefore it's translated as Chilufa. And so with this we understand the difference between the two Targumim, and we understand how klala can be translated as Chilufa, because it's not coming to tell us the translation, it's coming to answer this question, this difficulty of the idea that Hashem is noising a klala. It's explaining to us that it's chilufa from the Makabel. And regarding our last question, that the Targum Yonason himself translates the word klala in the third pasuk as a curse. So the explanation for that is, however, in the later pasuk where it says v'nasata haklala al har evil, it's not talking about that Hashem is giving it. It's talking about what the Yidden should do when they enter Eretz Yisrael. So over there, it doesn't speak of anoichi neisen lefneichem. So then also Targum Yonason translated it literally as malatataya, because it's a curse. It's only in the earlier psukim where we have this difficulty that he gives this understanding, this insight, this explanation that it's chilufa, it's the exchange, and that comes about because of the Makabel and not chas v'sholom, that it's what Hashem is noisin. Now we're going to move on to a long discussion to explain this idea of klala on a deeper level. So, however, it's still not glottic. The original question is still not fully resolved. And the difficulty is, how can we say that the chilufa klala is something that doesn't come from Hashem, but rather from the Makabel, as we explained? How can we say that? If the pasuk says, Re'ei anoichi neisen lefneichem hayom bracha uklala, which means that the anoichi neisen also refers to the uklala, and especially since it says bracha uklala with a vav hamesif. And so our answer that the klala is a chilufa through the Makabel doesn't fully fit with the pasuk saying that it's a noichi neisen lefneichem hayom, both the bracha and the klala. So the answer to this is, and because of the length, we're going to explain it in a few parts. The explanation of all of this is the general inyan of Targum of Torah for Yidden. It came about because of the Golus and Shibud of Yidden. That because of the situation, it became necessary to translate the Torah in the various languages of the 70 nations. Now, there are two ways of how to see and understand the difficulties of Golus. There is the way of Targum Onkelos, which is the Targum of Bavel, the place of Golus where the Helem and Hester is in its full force. So there the difficulties are taken as what they simply look like, an inyan of Klala. So he translates what's Klala. Klala is a curse, Levatin. And then there's Targum Yonasan and Yerushalmi, the Targumim of Eretz Yisrael, where there isn't such a Helen Vehester of Galus, so they see more clearly the panemius of things. And therefore they translate that the difficulties of Galus are really chilufa, meaning they are an exchange of two items that are of the same type. Because only the manner of the Hamshacha of the bracha is changed. But the purpose and intent, the panemius, is toiv and bracha. So really there's only bracha. And then there's the exchange of a bracha. It's still a bracha. It's just the exchange of a bracha. It's the manner of the Hamshacha which changed. But what is it? It's a bracha. It's toiv and bracha. And this is similar to what it says, Vayancha vayirivecha, ki kasher yaser ishes b'nai Hashem alekecha miyasreka, v'shamartas mitzvos Hashem alekecha, and Hashem is miviyach al eretz tova, that Hashem is miyaser, like ishes b'nai, for the good of the Yidden. So ultimately it's all an expression of bracha. That's the whole essence of it. It's the purpose of it. It's the intent of it. And it's just the manner of the Hamshacha that it sometimes comes out as a bracha and sometimes as chilufa, the opposite. But it's ultimately all a bracha, as we're going to continue on and explain. And this idea of the inner meaning and the inner purpose and the inner intent of the klala, it's all said in Lashon Targum, not in Lashon HaKodesh. Which Lashon Targum is meant to help the simple people who don't understand Lashon HaKodesh to understand the Torah. Meaning that we don't only tell the great people who the Golus doesn't affect so much. Not only to them do we tell the inner purpose and meaning of Klala and Golus, but rather also and primarily we tell the simple people over who the Helem and Hester has such a strong effect that they need the Targum. These are people who need Targum, and to them we're telling them their inner meaning of the Klala and Galus. And so with this we already answered two of the questions. We understand the difference between Targum Onkelos and Targum Yonasan and Targum Yerushalmi, because the Targum Yonasan and Yerushalmi is where the Galus doesn't have such a strong power, and so you can see the inner meaning, the inner purpose, the inner intent of the Galus. And we also understand how you could translate it as chilufa, because essentially it's all a bracha, it's just the manner of the Hamshacha which is different. And to answer the question, the second question of how come later on it says in the Targum Yonasan, he translates Klala as a curse the third time. So we're going to give a deep explanation for this. So this is all taught at the beginning of the parsha, when the general message is summarized. Meaning, when we discuss the general inyan of Avodah and its intent and purpose, so then we say the purpose and inner intent of the Klala is really chilufa. It's really all a bracha, and it's just a manner of Hamshacha which is different. However, when we're holding by the actual Avodah, where it's 4 psukim in, where it says, it's 4 psukim later, and it says, when Hashem will bring you to the land, and now you have to do the Avodah. So then in order to influence and penetrate the Nefesh Bahamis, so then we have to translate it literally, a curse. And the reason is because that's the only way to influence the Nefesh Bahamis. It has to be with something which is strong. As Razal say, you have to use that inyan of Gvura in order to overcome the Yetzer Hara. To understand this on an even deeper level, so the reason the Torah teaches us that the klala which Anochi Neisen Lefnechem is an inyan of chilufa, so it's not just for the purpose to ease the avodah of Yidden when they know that everything is toiv and bracha and it's just the manner of Hamshacha which is different. It's not just that, but rather it's important for the very inyan itself. It's an inyan for itself. So what's the meaning of this? The explanation of this Pepnimius Inyanim will be understood by first prefacing the following. According to Pshuta Shel Mikra, the Anechi Neisen refers to Hashem. And so l'cha'er, there's a difficulty with this. Since Anechi is above any of the names of Hashem, and it's not even Isramas b'shum ois v'shum kaitz, it's above any name, anything. There's nothing that could capture this Anechi, and it's Achdus Pshuta. So how is it possible that Klala can come from Achdus Pshuta? And the explanation is similar to what's explained in a different place, that true Pshittus expresses itself in his Chalkus. Pshittus expresses itself in his Chalkus. Because when Etzma Poshet is revealed in Ribui Kavin, especially when they are opposites, that itself is the proof that he isn't defined and limited in any form of or description, but is rather Poshet Betachlis Abshitus, which therefore even the Ribui Kavin and even opposites, they aren't an issue for him. Because if it's an Indian of Pshitus, which defies his Chalkus, that means it's not true Pshitus. His Chalkus is a contradiction to its Pshitus. The real Etzma Poshet is such that it's revealed in Ribui Kavim and even when they're opposites, and it still stays and remains Etzem Habashet. And therefore, since the Achdus Pshuta of Anechi is revealed specifically, according to this idea, it's revealed specifically through the opposite Kav, through Chilufa, so it comes out that Amshachas Elokus Lamata, through this Kav of Chilufa, is actually higher and deeper than the Amshachas Elokus Lamata when it's in the form of a bracha and revealed good. Since it's specifically the opposite which expresses the level that it comes from. So it comes out that specifically in Chilufa, do you get and reach a much higher level. And this whole idea, this whole inyan fits with what the Alter Rebbe explains, that the Pnimius inyan HaYisurim, what's the Pnimius of the inyan of Yisurim, of difficulties, of challenges, of struggles, of difficulties? It's the Bechina of Toiv from Alma Diskasya, from not Alma Diskaya, from a higher world of Alma Diskasya, which is from Yudke of Shem Avaya, not from the Vavke, like revealed good, but from Yudke, which is higher, but it comes down here in the form of Yisurim. So this is higher than revealed Toiv. And he explains that the reason is because they're chasadim hamachusim, which cannot come down in a revealed chesed. It's a much higher level. And this is also the deeper explanation of what it says, Es asher yav Hashem yechiach, that the inyan of Yav Hashem, it comes down in a manner of yechiach, chasadim hamachusim. It comes from a higher level because Hashem loves this person. Because revealed chesed is chitzonius chesed. It's from a lower level. And according to this, we can better understand the reason that Yisurim, which seem like a klala, are called chilufa. Because, like it says over there, Lefia emes einam rak brachas, and they are higher than revealed brachas, and it's just chilufa, an exchange in the manner of the ashpa, because it comes from a higher level. However, in order that also these brachas and lofty chasadim should be revealed, because that's what we want, it's through Yidden knowing and recognizing that the Yisurim are chasadim hamachusim, which come from Hashem, and this causes one to be smechim be Yisurim. And when a Yid has that awareness and that recognition that these are really chasadim from a much higher level, that brings about that it should also be in a revealed way. According to this, we can very well understand the connection between the Parsha and its Haftarah, as well as in general with the Haftarahs of the Shiva de Nechemta, the 7 weeks where we read Haftarahs of Nechama for the Churban Beis HaMikdash. In the Haftarahs, it speaks of the Nechama that Hashem Himself will comfort the Yidden, and in a way of Anechi, Onechi, Hu Menachmechem, which it says over there twice Anechi, which is a higher Gilui than the Gilui by Matan Torah, where it only says Anechi one time. The Haftarahs also speak of the great Hashpa and Verav Tuv Lebeis Yisrael, which is not found in other Haftarahs. And the reason for this is because the Chasadim Amachusim, which were hidden in the Gimel de Paranusa, in the 3 weeks from Shivas B'Tamaz until Tisha B'Av, and they're actually seen as Paranus because of their high level. So the reason why we have these great Giluyim is because those Chasadim Amachusim are revealed in the Shiva de Nechemta. And also what we said at the end, that the way that it comes down here in a revealed way is through Yid recognizing and realizing that it's really from a much higher level. So also the manner of the Gila is hinted to in the Haftarahs, and especially in the Haftarah of our Parsha of Aniyah Seira Leinu Chama. So here we're going to start it off and we'll continue it in the next section. Davodrum, he brings from the Medrash a reason for the Haftarahs of the Shiva, the Nechemta, and their order. It goes like this. In the first Haftarah, Hashem tells the Nevi'im that they should nachamu ami, that they should comfort the Yidden. In response, Knesset Yisrael says in the second Haftarah, V'teimer tzin azavani Hashem. The Yidden are saying that to get a nechama from the Nevi'im, for them, that's like Hashem left them. And they want a nechama to come from Hashem Himself. And when the Nevi'im bring this message to Hashem in the third Haftarah, where it says, Ani asayra loy nechama, the Yidden are not comforted. So Hashem responds in the fourth Haftarah, Anoichi Anoichi hu menachmechem, that He accepts their request and He Himself comforts them, which is in the next two Haftarahs, number 5 and 6. where it says in number 5, Rani Akara Lo Yaloda, and in number 6, Kumi Eri Kiba Erech, and then, which brings to what it says in the 7th of Torah, Sois Osis Ba'Hashem Togul Nafshi Belakai, that there is the comfort for the neshama. And so we're going to continue on and ask a question in this and show how this reflects the idea that through a yid seeing the inner meaning of the Yisurim, that really comes to a much higher level when a yid recognizes and realizes that, so that actually brings about that it should be good also in a revealed way. Taiva Nira V'Nigla. So l'chera over here, it's not understood. Hashem knows everything, and He knows the future. So He already knew originally that the Yidden wouldn't accept the nechama through the Nevi'im, and that He Himself would end up giving them the nechama. So if so, why did He wait until the Yidden complain that Azavani Hashem and Adnai Shechachani? Why does He have to wait for that? But according to what we said, it's understood. Since it's the time that comes after the great Yerida of Tisha B'Av, so it's possible that Yidden will be satisfied with the nechama from the Nevi'im. And especially since it's a nechama b'chiflayim. It starts off at the very beginning that nachamu twice. However, if that would be accepted by the Yidden, so then it means that the Yidden see the Puranas as a punishment and a klala, which the nechama of Nevi'im is enough for, and not that there is a lofty chesed from Hashem in the Puranas. However, since after the nechama from the Nevi'im, the Yidden complain, they have a taina. Then not only is the nechama not enough, but it's Azavani Hashem va'adnei shechachani. They see it as Hashem leaving them if He doesn't give them the nechama directly from Himself. By sending the Nevi'im, it's a form of Hashem leaving them. Not only is it not a nechama. So this shows that you didn't know and feel, which you said is the point. They know and feel that the Puranas and Yerida is only a chilufa. Then in truth they are chasadim amachusim. And therefore they complain about the nechama from the Nevi'im, that it's not the gilui of the pnimius and kavana of galus. It's not getting to that. It's a nechama. They don't want just a nechama. They want to get to see what it really is, the pnimius and the kavana of it. From the tremendousness of the Piranius, it's clear that these are extremely lofty and a high level of chasadim, ones that can only come from Hashem Himself. And this awareness and knowledge itself brings the gilui. So Hashem waits for the Yidden because that's what brings it. This is what brings the gili that Hashem agrees with the taina, with the tvi of the Yidden, the complaint of the Yidden, until it'll be b'shleimus in the gula mitzvah hashlema, when we will see the chasadim in a revealed way and with our physical eyes, b'teiv hanira v'hanigla.